Admiral Thexvar Corvanus stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he gazed out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. The massive dreadnought was the pride of the Zeltharian Empire, stretching over 15 kilometers in length and bristling with quantum disruptors capable of cracking planets in half. Behind him, 300 identical vessels followed in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the silver and crimson of imperial might. Admiral Captain Vexthal approached with careful steps, his scaled hide showing the nervous color patterns that betrayed his unease. We are approaching the boundary markers of the restricted zone. The human territory begins in approximately 6 standard cycles. Corvanus turned his massive head, his 6 eyes focusing on the younger officer with barely concealed contempt. The captain was young, barely 2 centuries old, and still carried the superstitious fears of lesser species. Captain, remind me again why we should concern ourselves with the territorial claims of a species that has existed for less than a galactic rotation. The bridge fell silent except for the humming of the ship's massive engines. Every officer present knew the stories, the whispered tales that had spread through the outer rim territories like a plague. Entire fleets vanishing without a trace. Distress signals cut short mid-transmission. Ancient civilizations that had ruled for millennia suddenly, going dark after venturing too close to the small blue-green world the humans called Earth. Sir, Vexthal's voice barely rose above a whisper. The Confederation of Aligned Worlds has classified this entire sector as forbidden. Even the hegemony of stars has agreed to respect the boundary. There have been 17 major fleet disappearances in the past 50 cycles, all within the human sphere of influence. Corvanus let out a sound that could only be described as a laugh, though it held no warmth. His species had conquered a dozen galaxies before the humans had even discovered fire. They had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations, had seen species rise from primitive hunters to galactic powers, only to eventually fall to the inevitable march of time and war. The humans were nothing special. They were young, weak, and foolishly territorial. 17 fleets, Corvanus repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. How many ships were in these fleets, Captain? A few dozen? Perhaps 100 if they were feeling particularly bold. Sir, the smallest was the Corden expedition. 250 ships, including 3 planet killers. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. The Cordens were not weaklings. Their technology rivaled that of most elder races, and their military doctrine was considered among the most sophisticated in known space. Still, there had to be a reasonable explanation. Perhaps the humans had stumbled upon some ancient weapons cache, or maybe they had formed an alliance with one of the mysterious species from the galactic core. And the largest? He asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. The Thousand Suns Armada. Vexthal's voice was barely audible now. 1,200 ships, including the Star Render, their Fortress-class command vessel. They sent 1 transmission after crossing into human space. First contact established. Humans appear primitive, but numerous. Beginning pacification protocols. That was 8 cycles ago. Nothing since. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. The Thousand Suns Armada was legendary, commanded by War Marshal Keth Moore, who had never lost a battle in 4 centuries of continuous warfare. They had conquered the Spiral Arm in less than a decade, crushing resistance with such efficiency that most worlds surrendered rather than face them in open battle. Corvanus felt a brief moment of uncertainty, but quickly pushed it aside. He had not risen to become Supreme Admiral of the Imperial Fleet by giving in to doubt. The Zeltharian Empire controlled more star systems than any previous civilization in galactic history. Their technology was unmatched, their military undefeated, and their resolve absolute. Whatever had happened to those other fleets was irrelevant. They had clearly underestimated the humans, or perhaps been caught off guard by some unexpected tactic. Set course for the human homeworld, Corvanus commanded, his voice carrying across the bridge with absolute authority. All ships are to maintain battle formation. Shields at maximum, weapons charged, and ready. Sir, another officer spoke up, this one older and bearing the scars of countless campaigns. Perhaps we should attempt communication first? The humans may be willing to negotiate. Corvanus turned his full attention to the speaker, Commander Zethal, his most senior tactical officer. The commander had served under him for nearly 50 cycles and had never questioned his orders before. The fact that he was doing so now spoke to the level of unease that had infected even his most trusted subordinates. Commander, you seem to have forgotten our mission parameters, Corvanus said, his voice dangerously quiet. We are not here to negotiate. The High Council has decided that human expansion must be stopped before they become a legitimate threat. Intelligence suggests they possess technology that could rival our own within a few centuries. We cannot allow that to happen. It was true, though the intelligence was fragmentary at best. Human ships had been observed using some form of faster-than-light travel that didn't rely on hyperspace lanes, allowing them unprecedented mobility. Their weapons appeared to be kinetic rather than energy-based, which seemed primitive until analysts realized that their projectiles moved at significant fractions of the speed of light. Most disturbing of all were reports of human soldiers who seemed to ignore injuries that would incapacitate members of most other species, continuing to fight long after they should have been dead. Begin the approach, Corvanus ordered. I want all ship commanders to understand that we are dealing with primitives who have gotten lucky. Do not let superstition cloud your judgment. We will demonstrate to the galaxy that the Zeltharian Empire bows to no one, regardless of how many fleets they may have somehow managed to destroy. As the massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Corvanus felt a moment of savage satisfaction. The human star was unremarkable, a simple yellow dwarf that wouldn't even register on most star charts if not for the supposed threat of its inhabitants. The planets were equally unimpressive, a handful of rocky worlds and gas giants that showed no signs of significant terraforming or development. Initial scans completed, Admiral, reported the sensor officer, her voice steady despite the nervous twitching of her antennae. We're detecting approximately 47 human vessels in the outer system. They appear to be conducting routine patrols. Their technology reads as significantly inferior to our own. Corvanus nodded with satisfaction. Finally, some sanity in this mad situation. 47 ships against 300 of the most advanced warships ever constructed. The humans would surrender within minutes once they realized the futility of resistance. Hail them, he commanded. Let's give them one chance to surrender before we begin the pacification. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human face that appeared remarkably ordinary. No exotic features, no obvious cybernetic enhancements, just a middle-aged male with graying hair and tired eyes. The human was wearing what appeared to be a simple uniform with minimal ornamentation, certainly nothing that suggested high rank or authority. This is Captain Sarek Chun of the Earth Defense Force, the human said, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. You have entered restricted space without authorization. Please state your intentions and prepare to be escorted to the nearest processing station. Corvanus stared at the screen in disbelief. The human was clearly female despite the masculine appearance he had initially perceived, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was her tone, completely devoid of fear or even concern. She spoke as if she were addressing a minor traffic violation rather than facing a fleet that could glass her entire planet. I am Admiral Thexvar Corvanus of the Zeltharian Imperial Fleet, he said, drawing himself up to his full, imposing height. You will surrender immediately and prepare your world for Imperial occupation. Any resistance will result in the complete elimination of your species. Captain Chin's expression didn't change. Admiral, you are in violation of multiple treaties and interstellar accords. This is your final warning to withdraw from our space. Failure to comply will result in defensive action. A ripple of laughter passed through the bridge crew. The human was threatening them. A single ship, probably crewed by fewer than 1,000 beings, was threatening the largest military force assembled in this part of the galaxy. "Captain," Corvinus said, his voice filled with mock concern, "I'm afraid you don't understand the situation. We have 300 ships, each one capable of destroying your entire fleet. You have 47 vessels that our sensors indicate are technologically inferior in every measurable way. Perhaps you should reconsider your position." For the first time, something resembling emotion crossed the human's face. It might have been sadness or perhaps disappointment. "Admiral, 17 other commanders have made similar statements. They were all warned, just as you're being warned now. They chose not to listen." The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Corvinus felt a cold fury building in his chest. The human had dismissed him, had cut off communications, as if he were some minor annoyance, rather than the supreme commander of the most powerful military force in known space. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, her voice tight with concern, "we're detecting energy signatures throughout the system. It appears the humans have been powering up weapons systems." "Only 47 ships," Corvinus reminded her coldly. "Begin attack formation. I want the human homeworld in range within the hour. We'll start by destroying their pathetic defense fleet, then move on to their cities. Perhaps a few million casualties will convince them to be more respectful." As the Zeltharian fleet began to advance, Corvinus couldn't shake the memory of Captain Chen's final words. 17 other commanders, all warned, all chose not to listen. He pushed the thought aside with practiced ease. Whatever had happened to those other fleets, it wouldn't happen to him. The Zeltharian Empire had not conquered half the galaxy by backing down from fights with primitives. The first human ship appeared on long-range sensors, a sleek vessel that seemed almost organic in design. It was roughly the size of a Zeltharian heavy cruiser, but sensor readings suggested it carried significantly less armor and weaponry. Perfect. They would make an example of it. "Target the lead human vessel," Corvinus commanded. "All forward batteries, full power. Show them what they're dealing with." The Eternal Dominion shuddered as its massive quantum disruptors fired in unison, sending enough destructive energy to vaporize a moon racing across space toward the human ship. The bridge crew watched with anticipation as the energy bolts closed the distance in seconds. The human vessel seemed to flicker, like a mirage in desert heat, and the disruptor bolts passed harmlessly through empty space. "What happened?" Corvinus demanded, his voice sharp with confusion. "Did they jump to hyperspace?" "No, sir," the sensor officer replied, her voice barely steady. "They're still there. Same position, same heading. It's as if our weapons passed right through them." Corvinus stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. Some kind of phasing technology? Energy deflection? It had to be a fluke, some kind of malfunction with their targeting systems. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," he ordered. "Maximum power, full spread pattern." 300 ships opened fire simultaneously, filling the space around the human vessel with enough destructive energy to crack a planet's crust. The light was so intense that the bridge's view screens automatically dimmed to prevent damage to their occupants' vision. When the energy dissipated, the human ship was still there, unchanged and apparently undamaged. "Impossible," whispered Commander Setad. "Nothing can survive that level of firepower. Nothing." As if in response to his words, the human ship began to accelerate, moving with a speed that should have torn it apart under the stress of its own momentum. Within seconds, it had covered a distance that should have taken minutes, positioning itself directly in front of the Zeltharian formation. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, his voice cracking with strain, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." The screen flickered to life again, showing the same calm, human face as before. Captain Chun looked exactly as she had moments earlier, showing no signs of stress or concern despite having just survived an attack that should have reduced her ship to subatomic particles. "Admiral Corvinus," she said, her tone still maddeningly conversational, "you have committed an act of unprovoked aggression against Earth Defense Force vessels. As per standard protocols, you now have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal proceedings or face the consequences." Consequences? Corvinus snarled, his earlier composure completely shattered. Your ship should be a cloud of plasma. What kind of technology are you using? 25 seconds, Admiral. The human's calm was infuriating. Corvinus had faced down the most terrifying weapons of war in galactic history, had stared into the maws of planet-eating creatures and ancient artificial intelligences that had laid waste to entire civilizations. But something about this simple human captain filled him with a dread he couldn't quite name. All ships, ramming speed, he shouted. If our weapons won't work, we'll crush them with our hulls. The Zeltharian fleet surged forward, 300 massive vessels moving at maximum acceleration toward a single human ship that seemed impossibly small and fragile in comparison. The distance closed rapidly, and for a moment Corvinus allowed himself to believe that this would end the madness. Whatever exotic defensive technology the humans possessed, it couldn't possibly protect them from several million tons of armor and machinery moving at significant fractions of the speed of light. 10 seconds, Admiral. Captain Chen's voice came over the speakers, still calm, still utterly without fear. The first Zeltharian ship reached the human vessel and passed through it. The massive dreadnought emerged on the other side, completely intact, but something was wrong. Its engines were dark, its weapons silent, its hull scarred with deep gouges that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. What's happening to the Iron Fist? Corvinus demanded. Report. No response from Captain Vorthak, sir, came the reply from communications. The ship appears to be dead. All systems are showing critical failure. One by one, the ships of his fleet passed through the human vessel, and one by one, they emerged as lifeless hulks. Whatever was happening defied every law of physics Corvinus knew, violated every principle of technology and warfare he had learned in his long career. Time's up, Admiral, Captain Chen said, and for the first time, her expression showed something that might have been pity. You were warned. The human ship began to change. Its smooth, organic curves shifted and flowed like liquid metal, expanding rapidly until it dwarfed even the largest Zeltharian dreadnought. Weapons ports opened along its hull, revealing technology that seemed to bend space itself around its barrels. And from those weapons came a light that was somehow darker than the void between stars. The last thing Admiral Corvinus saw before his ship's systems failed was his entire fleet, 300 vessels that had taken centuries to build and decades to crew, drifting helplessly in space like dead leaves on a cosmic wind. In the distance, 46 more human ships had appeared, surrounding the disabled Zeltharian force with the casual efficiency of hunters who had done this many times before. As the Eternal Dominion's emergency power failed and the bridge plunged into darkness, Corvinus finally understood what had happened to the other 17 fleets. They hadn't been destroyed by superior technology or overwhelming numbers. They had been collected, like specimens in some vast museum, by beings whose true nature was so far beyond Zeltharian understanding that their very existence broke the fundamental rules of reality. The humans had tried to warn them. They had given them every chance to withdraw peacefully. But, like all the others, Corvinus had been too proud, too certain of his own superiority to listen. Now, as his consciousness faded and his ship joined the growing graveyard of vessels that had dared to challenge humanity's warnings, he wondered what the humans did with the crews of captured ships. Did they study them? Preserve them? Or did they simply add them to whatever vast collection of species had been foolish enough to test the boundaries of Earth's territory? The last sensation he felt was the gentle vibration of tractor beams taking hold of his ship, pulling it toward destinations unknown. Somewhere in the darkness, he could hear Captain Chen's voice speaking to someone else, her tone still calm and professional. Control, this is Shepard 7. We have another collection complete. 300 vessels, approximate crew count of 2 million. Requesting guidance for processing and storage. The response was immediate and businesslike. Copy, Shepard 7. Direct them to Storage Facility Gamma 7. Standard preservation protocols are in effect. Good work. As consciousness finally fled, Corvinus realized with bitter clarity that humanity's warnings had never been about protecting themselves from invasion. They had been trying to protect the rest of the galaxy from becoming part of whatever vast, incomprehensible project they were conducting out here in the darkness between stars. The warnings had been genuine kindness from beings who collected civilizations the way children collected insects, who preserved entire species not out of malice, but out of a scientific curiosity so vast and alien that the very concept of it defied understanding. They had been warned. They had been given every chance to turn back. And like all the others before them, they had chosen pride over wisdom, arrogance over survival. Commander Zethal regained consciousness in what appeared to be a perfectly reproduced section of a Zeltharian command center. The walls bore the familiar crystalline patterns of his home architecture. The gravity felt exactly right for his species, and even the air carried the subtle ozone scent that all Zeltharian vessels maintain for psychological comfort. For a brief, wonderful moment, he allowed himself to believe that the encounter with the human ship had been nothing more than a fever dream. Then he noticed the silence. No engine vibrations. No chatter. No background hum of a functioning starship. The quiet was so complete it made his head ring. Zethal pushed himself upright, his forelegs steadying him as he surveyed his surroundings more carefully. The command center was perfect in every detail except one. It had no external viewports, no connection to the rest of the ship, and no way out. "Admiral," he called, his voice echoing strangely in the enclosed space. "Captain Vexthal?" "Anyone?" A soft chime answered him, followed by a voice that spoke perfect Zeltharian in a tone so casual it might have been ordering refreshments. "Commander Zethal, you are awake earlier than projected. Please remain calm while the orientation system initializes." The air in front of him shimmered, and suddenly he was no longer alone. A human figure materialized, but not in the way of teleportation or holographic projection. It simply became present, as if it had always been there, and his perception had finally caught up to reality. The being appeared to be female, with the unremarkable features that seemed common to the species, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of vast intelligence and even vaster age. "My name is Dr. Sarah Martinez," the figure said, settling into a chair that definitely hadn't been there moments before. "I am the director of xenological preservation for this facility. I understand you must have questions." Zethal's warrior instinct screamed at him to attack, to fight, to do anything other than stand there having a conversation with his captor. But something about the human's presence made violence seem not just impossible, but irrelevant. It was like being angry at a natural disaster or attempting to threaten the laws of physics. "What have you done with my crew?" he asked instead, proud that his voice remained steady. "Your crew is safe," Dr. Martinez replied, and something in her tone suggested she was being completely truthful. "They're currently in various stages of the awakening process, depending on their individual physiologies and psychological resilience. We have found that gradual acclimatization prevents most of the trauma associated with displacement." Displacement? Zethal felt a cold dread creeping up his spine. "Where are we?" "You are in Storage Facility Gamma 7, located approximately 47,000 light-years from your point of origin. The facility is currently home to representatives of 836 different species, collected from various expeditions that have ventured into restricted space over the past 2 centuries. The numbers hit Zethal like physical blows. 836 species. 2 centuries of collection. The scope of it was beyond anything he had imagined in his darkest fears about the human threat. "You're preserving us," he said, the realization dawning like a cold sunrise. "We're specimens in some kind of zoo." Dr. Martinez tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "That's a crude, but not entirely inaccurate assessment. Though research facility would be more precise. We are conducting long-term studies on the development of consciousness, technology, and civilization across multiple species and environmental conditions." For what purpose? The question burst out of him with more force than he had intended. Why are you doing this? The human was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press against his very soul. Commander, how long has your species been spacefaring? 12,000 standard cycles, Zethal replied automatically, then caught himself. Why was he answering her questions? And how many other species have you encountered in that time? Hundreds, perhaps 1,000. The answer came out despite his attempts to remain silent. How many of those species are still spacefaring today? Zethal felt his blood cooling as he realized where this was leading. Most species eventually fade. Civilizations rise and fall. It's the natural order. Indeed, Dr. Martinez nodded. The natural order. Species develop intelligence, achieve space travel, expand rapidly, and then disappear. Sometimes through war, sometimes through environmental catastrophe, sometimes through simple entropy. The average lifespan of a spacefaring civilization is approximately 15,000 standard years from first contact to complete extinction. She stood and began walking around the room, her movements carrying an unsettling grace. Humanity has been observing this pattern for considerably longer than we have been spacefaring ourselves. We have watched countless civilizations rise to greatness and then vanish, taking with them art, philosophy, technology, and perspectives that can never be recovered. So you preserve them, Zethal said, beginning to understand. You collect them before they can go extinct. We try to, the human admitted, but it's complicated. Most species only become truly interesting from a research perspective once they've achieved interstellar capability, but by then, they're also developing the technologies that will eventually lead to their destruction. The window for collection is often quite narrow. Zethal thought of his own people's history, of the wars that had consumed entire star systems, of the weapons that could crack worlds, of the slow, inexorable decline in birth rates that plagued most advanced civilizations. How long do we have? Your species? Dr. Martinez consulted what appeared to be a tablet, though Zethal hadn't seen her retrieve it. Based on current technological and social trends, we estimate approximately 3,000 years before terminal decline begins. 5,000 before complete extinction becomes inevitable. The casual way she delivered this death sentence for his entire species left Zethal speechless. Dr. Martinez seemed to notice his distress, and her expression softened slightly. Commander, we understand that this is difficult to process. The transition from active participant to preserved specimen is never easy, regardless of species. But consider the alternative. In 5,000 years, your people would face extinction. Their knowledge, their culture, their unique perspective on the universe would be lost forever. Here, they will be preserved indefinitely. Your children and your children's children will continue to exist, to grow, to develop in ways that would be impossible in the terminal phase of natural civilization. Children. Zethal latched onto the word. We can reproduce. Of course. The facility is designed to support natural population growth within sustainable parameters. We currently house approximately 2 billion individuals across all species, with room for considerable expansion. Your people will live full lives, pursue careers, form relationships, contribute to the collective knowledge of the facility. As prisoners, Dr. Martinez considered this. The environment you will inhabit is indistinguishable from the best worlds of your empire. The work available includes everything from scientific research to artistic endeavor to philosophical study. You will have access to the combined knowledge of 835 other species, opportunities for learning and growth that no individual in your original civilization could have dreamed of. Is this truly imprisonment, or is it liberation from the limitations of natural existence? Zethal wanted to argue, to rage against the casual destruction of everything he had known and believed in. But part of him, the part that had studied the histories of dead civilizations and seen the patterns she described, whispered that perhaps the human was right. Perhaps this was not capture, but Salvation. What about those who resist? He asked. Those who cannot accept this preservation. We have facilities designed for every psychological profile, Dr. Martinez replied. Some individuals prefer to maintain the illusion of their original civilization and are provided with environments that simulate their home conditions perfectly. Others embrace the opportunity to interact with alien species and join our research programs. A few choose to enter extended sleep until they are ready to adapt. We accommodate all preferences. And if someone chooses death instead, the human's expression grew sad. That choice is respected, though we encourage individuals to give adaptation a reasonable trial period. Most find that existence here, while different from what they expected, offers compensations that their original lives could not have provided. A new voice interrupted their conversation, speaking in the distinctive clicking language of the Corridans. Zethal turned to see one of the insectoid beings that had supposedly been among the first collected fleets, though this individual appeared to be wearing some kind of translation device. Dr. Martinez, the Corridan said, its mechanical translator rendering the words in Standard Galactic. The morning research briefing is beginning. Several of the Zeltharian crew members are expressing interest in participating. Thank you, Researcher Kixthek, the human replied. I'll be there shortly. She turned back to Zethal. Commander, Researcher Kixthek has been with us for 43 years. Perhaps you would like to hear their perspective on life in the facility? The Corridan moved closer, its compound eyes reflecting prismatic light. Commander Zethal, I commanded one of the vessels in the expedition that first encountered human space. Like you, I was initially resistant to the concept of preservation. I demanded to be returned to my people, to my duties, to my life. And now? Zethal asked. Now, I lead a research team studying quantum consciousness interfaces, working with beings from 17 different species to understand the fundamental nature of intelligence itself. The work I do here is more important and more fulfilling than anything I accomplished during my military career. My original civilization has been extinct for 12 years now, destroyed in a war with the Threxian Concordat. Every member of my species in the galaxy is now in this facility or one of the others. Others? Zethal felt his world shifting again. How many facilities are there? Dr. Martinez answered. Currently operational? 47, scattered throughout this region of the galaxy. We're opening new ones as collection operations expand into previously unexplored territories. The scope of the human operation was staggering. 47 facilities, each containing hundreds of species, billions of individuals, all preserved like living museums of galactic civilization. It was simultaneously the most horrifying and most magnificent thing Zethal had ever contemplated. Why warn them at all? He asked suddenly. If you're going to collect them anyway, why give them the chance to resist? Dr. Martinez paused, and for a moment something almost like pain crossed her features. Because consent matters, even when the alternative is extinction. We would prefer willing cooperation to forced collection. Many species, when they truly understand what we're offering, choose to join voluntarily. How many? Approximately 30%, she admitted. The rest require intervention. Kixthek clicked in what Zethal's translator identified as amusement. Commander, consider this. Your species was offered the chance to withdraw peacefully from human space. You could have returned to your empire, reported the encounter, and lived out your natural lives. Instead, you chose to attack beings whose technology is so far beyond yours that your weapons passed through their ship like light through empty space. Was this the decision of rational minds? Or was it the product of evolutionary programming that demands expansion and conflict regardless of consequences? The question stung because Zethal knew the answer. Everything in Zeltharian culture, from their educational systems to their military doctrine, emphasized dominance through superior force. They had attacked the humans not because it was tactically sound, but because their entire civilization was built around the concept of conquest. They had been as incapable of choosing peaceful withdrawal as a shark was of choosing vegetarianism. The programming runs deep, Dr. Martinez observed, apparently following his thoughts. Most species develop along similar lines. Intelligence plus resource competition plus territorial instinct equals expansion through conquest. It's an almost universal pattern, and it always leads to the same end result. But not humans, Zethal said. You developed differently. We had help, the doctor replied cryptically. Our situation was unique. Before Zethal could ask for clarification, another figure materialized in the room. This one was clearly human, but somehow different from Dr. Martinez. Where she seemed normal, if unusually composed, this new arrival felt wrong in ways that Zethal's mind struggled to process. The newcomer appeared to be male, elderly, with silver hair and kind eyes, but looking at him was like staring into a deep well that might go down forever. Sarah, the new human said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Zethal's bones. We've received word from the outer monitoring stations. 3 more fleets are approaching the boundary. Hegemony ships, by their configuration. Dr. Martinez sighed. How many? The first group is approximately 800 vessels. The second is larger. And the third? The elderly man's expression grew troubled. 14,000 ships. The largest military expedition we've yet encountered. Zethal felt his secondary heart skip. 14,000 ships was larger than most civilizations' entire military forces. Whatever species was approaching had committed essentially their entire space navy to this expedition. Recommendations? Dr. Martinez asked. Standard warning protocols, the man replied. If they withdraw peacefully, we allow them to depart. If they choose to engage, we collect them, the doctor finished. Understood. Begin preparation for Facilities Delta through Mu. This may be the largest single collection event in our history. As the elderly human vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, Zethal realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Somewhere out in space, a massive military force was about to make the same mistake his own fleet had made, driven by the same evolutionary programming that had doomed countless civilizations before them. Commander, Dr. Martinez said, turning back to him, would you like to observe the incoming engagement? It might help you understand the scope of what we're doing here. And perhaps you can help us prepare for the psychological integration of your new neighbors. Zethal found himself nodding, though part of him recoiled at the thought of watching another fleet suffer the same fate as his own. But another part, the part that had always been fascinated by tactical analysis and military strategy, was desperately curious to see how the humans would handle a force of such magnitude. As they walked toward what Dr. Martinez called the observation deck, Kickstek fell in a step beside them. Commander, the Corridon said, you will find that watching from this side of the engagement provides a very different perspective. When you see the pattern repeated across multiple species, multiple conflicts, you begin to understand that this is not conquest. This is conservation. The observation deck turned out to be a vast chamber with walls that seemed to be made of transparent aluminum, providing a clear view out into space. But space here was not the empty void that Zethal expected. Ships of hundreds of different configurations drifted in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the markings of species from across the galaxy. It was a graveyard of civilizations, a museum of military might that represented thousands of years of technological development. The collected fleets, Dr. Martinez explained unnecessarily. We maintain them in perfect condition, both as historical artifacts and as comfort items for the crews when they're ready to see them again. In the distance, Zethal could see construction work ongoing on what appeared to be habitat modules the size of small moons. Clearly, the humans were preparing for a significant expansion of their population. Dr. Martinez, he said quietly, what happens when you've collected every spacefaring species in the galaxy? The human smiled, and for the first time there was something warm and genuine in her expression. Then, Commander, we begin the next phase of the project. But that's a conversation for another day. As alarms began to sound softly throughout the facility, announcing the approach of the first hegemony fleet, Zethal realized that he was about to witness the end of another civilization. But perhaps, if Dr. Martinez was right, he was also about to witness its salvation. War Sovereign Drakthul Vexhara stood in the command chamber of the Galaxy's End, the largest vessel ever constructed by the tri-species hegemony. The massive ship stretched over 30 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapons systems that represented the combined military knowledge of three ancient civilizations. Behind him, 14,000 ships moved in perfect formation, representing not just the military might of the hegemony, but the desperate last hope of dozens of allied species. Sovereign Intelligence Prime Mordak approached with the careful deference that his species showed to hegemony leadership. We are detecting energy signatures consistent with human technology. The boundary markers are approximately 2 cycles ahead. Vexhara nodded, his massive frame casting shadows across the command chamber's crystalline displays. As a member of the Valdorian species, he stood nearly 4 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton bearing the ritual scars that marked him as a veteran of 1,000 battles. He had lived for over 8 centuries, had seen the rise and fall of entire stellar nations, and had never encountered an enemy that could not be defeated through superior force and tactical brilliance. But the reports filtering in from across the galaxy had shaken even his confidence. The Zeltharian Empire, the most powerful military force in known space, had simply vanished. 300 ships gone without a trace. The Corden Expedition, the Thousand Suns Armada, the Iron Fist Confederation, one by one, the greatest military powers in the galaxy had sent fleets into human space and simply disappeared. Display the tactical analysis, Vexhara commanded, his voice resonating through the chamber's acoustic systems. The central hologram activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of human space. The territory appeared modest, perhaps a dozen star systems, but intelligence reports suggested that appearances were deeply deceiving. Human ships had been observed operating far beyond their official borders, moving with technologies that defied every known principle of faster-than-light travel. Analysis indicates that human defensive capabilities are unprecedented, Mordak reported, his translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in hegemony military doctrine. Ships observed passing through solid matter, weapons that appear to manipulate fundamental forces, defensive systems that render conventional attacks ineffective. Magic, spat Commander Kethvar from his position at the weapons console. Primitive superstition. There is no technology that cannot be overcome with sufficient firepower. Vexhara was not so sure. The hegemony had formed specifically in response to the growing human threat, bringing together the military forces of the Valdorian Empire, the Synthetic Consciousness Alliance, and the Psi-Collective of Zenth. Between them, they represented over 50,000 years of technological development and military experience. If raw firepower was insufficient, then perhaps the answer lay in coordination and superior numbers. Signal the fleet, he commanded. All ships are to maintain defensive formation. Shields at maximum, weapons charged, sensor sweeps at full intensity. Whatever these humans are hiding, we will discover it and exploit it. As the massive fleet approached the boundary of human space, long-range sensors began detecting the expected warning beacons. The messages were transmitted in hundreds of languages, all carrying the same basic content. Unauthorized vessels were to withdraw immediately or face defensive action. Standard procedure, Vexhara observed. Every species attempts to project strength through bluffing before revealing their true capabilities. Begin the advance. The first human vessel appeared on sensors exactly where intelligence reports had predicted it would be. A single ship, sleek and unremarkable, maintaining position at the edge of their territorial boundary. It was roughly equivalent to a hegemony-heavy cruiser in size, but sensor analysis revealed technology that didn't match any known classification system. Sovereign, the communications officer called out, "We are receiving a transmission from the human vessel." Display it. The main screen activated, showing a human face that appeared completely ordinary. The being was male, middle-aged, with the kind of unremarkable features that would make him forgettable in any crowd. He wore a simple uniform with minimal ornamentation, and his expression suggested complete calm rather than the fear that should have accompanied facing the largest military force in galactic history. "This is Captain James Morrison of the Earth Defense Force," the human said, his tone conversational. "You have entered restricted space without authorization. Please state your intentions and prepare to be escorted to the nearest processing station." Vexhara felt a moment of disbelief. Processing station? The human was speaking as if the hegemony fleet was some kind of commercial convoy that had wandered into a customs inspection zone. "I am War Sovereign Drakthul Vexhara of the Tri-Species Hegemony," he replied, drawing himself up to his full imposing height. "We represent the combined military might of 3 ancient civilizations and 47 allied species. We are here to determine the fate of our missing fleets and to establish the true nature of human capabilities." Captain Morrison's expression didn't change. "War Sovereign, you are in violation of multiple treaties and interstellar accords. This is your final warning to withdraw from our space. Failure to comply will result in defensive action." "Defensive action?" Commander Kethvar laughed, the sound echoing through the command chamber. "Captain, you are facing 14,000 ships, including the most advanced weapons systems ever developed. Your single vessel cannot possibly pose a threat to this fleet." For the first time, something resembling emotion crossed the human's face. It might have been sadness or perhaps disappointment. "Commander, 18 other fleets have made similar statements. They were all warned, just as you are being warned now. They chose not to listen." The transmission ended, leaving the command chamber in stunned silence. 18 fleets. The number was staggering. If accurate, it meant that humanity had somehow neutralized the military forces of nearly half the major civilizations in the galaxy. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, "we're detecting energy signatures throughout the system. Multiple contacts, all appearing to be human vessels." The tactical display updated, showing the true scope of what they were facing. Not one ship, but hundreds materializing from what appeared to be empty space. Each vessel was roughly the same size as the first, unremarkable in design, but radiating power signatures that defied analysis. "How many?" Vexhara demanded. "Difficult to determine, sir. They appear to be shifting, phasing in and out of our sensor range. Current count shows approximately 400 vessels, but the number keeps changing." Vexhara studied the display with growing unease. 400 ships against 14,000 should have been a massacre. But something about the calm confidence of the human captain suggested that numbers might not be as important as the hegemony had assumed. "All ships, attack formation," he commanded. "Target the lead human vessel. Full power, coordinated strike." The response was immediate. 14,000 ships opened fire simultaneously, creating a light show that was visible from several star systems away. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize entire worlds, to crack the crusts of planets, to boil away the atmospheres of gas giants. When the energy dissipated, the human ship was still there, completely undamaged. "Impossible," whispered Intelligence Prime Mordak. "The energy readings show direct hits. Multiple direct hits. Nothing can survive that level of destruction." The human ship began to move, accelerating with impossible speed and agility. Within seconds, it had positioned itself in the center of the hegemony formation, surrounded by thousands of vessels that should have been able to destroy it with their secondary weapons alone. "All ships, close formation," Vexhara shouted. "Ramming speed. If we cannot destroy it with weapons, we will crush it with mass." The hegemony fleet converged on the human vessel like a closing fist. Ships weighing millions of tons moved at significant fractions of light speed, creating a concentration of destructive force that should have torn apart the very fabric of space-time. The human ship seemed to flicker, becoming translucent, and the hegemony vessels passed through it like it was made of light and shadow. But as they emerged on the other side, something was wrong. The ships were intact, but their weapons were silent, their engines dark, their communications dead. What happened to them? Vexhara demanded. Report. Unknown, sir, came the reply from the sensor station. All vessels appear to be structurally intact, but we're reading no signs of active systems. It's as if something has simply turned them off. The human vessel materialized again, now accompanied by dozens of others that seemed to fade into existence from nowhere. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the main screen again, his expression unchanged. War Sovereign, he said, you have committed acts of unprovoked aggression against Earth Defense Force vessels. As per standard protocols, your fleet will now be processed for collection and preservation. Collection? Vexhara snarled. What are you talking about? Sir, the navigation officer interrupted. We're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from multiple vectors. Whatever those ships are doing, it's affecting space-time itself. The human vessels began to change. Their smooth hulls flowed and shifted like liquid metal, expanding rapidly until each ship dwarfed even the mighty galaxy's end. Weapons ports opened along their surfaces, revealing technology that seemed to fold space around itself. War Sovereign, Captain Morrison's voice carried a note of what might have been genuine regret. Your species and your allies will be preserved and studied. Your knowledge, your culture, your unique perspectives on existence will be maintained for future generations to learn from. This is not destruction, it is salvation. Salvation from what? Vexhara demanded. From extinction. Your civilizations, like all civilizations, are following predictable patterns that lead inevitably to self-destruction. We have observed this cycle repeat across thousands of species over millions of years. We offer an alternative. The weapons of the transformed human ships began to fire, but instead of destructive energy, they projected something that looked like crystallized starlight. The beams passed through the hulls of hegemony vessels without causing damage, but wherever they touched, systems began shutting down in perfectly organized sequences. Sir, the engineering officer called out in panic. Our engines are powering down. Weapons offline. Life support switching to emergency power. I can't stop it. Vexhara watched in horror as his magnificent fleet, the combined might of 3 species and the hope of 47 others, was systematically and effortlessly neutralized by technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. Ship after ship went dark, drifting helplessly as invisible forces took control of their systems. You cannot do this, he said, his voice breaking with rage and despair. We are sovereign beings with the right to determine our own fate. Captain Morrison's image flickered, replaced by a different human. This one was female, older, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of knowledge that hurt to look into. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the ship's hull. War Sovereign, she said, you have the right to choose extinction. That has always been an option. But you do not have the right to choose extinction for the species under your command, for the billions of individuals who trusted you to protect them, or for the future generations who will never be born if your civilizations follow their current trajectories. Who are you to make that decision? Vexhara demanded. We are the species that survived, she replied simply. We're the ones who face the same choice your people face now, and found a different path. We are the guardians of what remains when the inevitable ending comes. The galaxy's end shuddered as tractor beams of impossible power took hold of the massive vessel. Through the viewports, Vexhara could see his entire fleet being gathered like leaves on the wind, drawn toward destinations unknown. What will happen to us? He asked, the fight finally going out of him. You will be preserved, the human woman replied. You will live, learn, grow, and contribute to the greatest collection of knowledge and culture ever assembled. Your people will continue to exist long after your original civilizations would have collapsed into dust. As prisoners, as survivors. The choice of how you experience that survival is yours to make. As the galaxy's end was pulled into the cargo bay of a human vessel so large it defied comprehension, Vexhara realized that humanity's warnings had never been threats. They had been offers of mercy from beings whose power was so far beyond conventional understanding that they could afford to be kind. The last thing he saw before the bay doors closed was the rest of his fleet, 14,000 ships representing the pinnacle of 3 civilizations' achievements, being sorted and cataloged with the casual efficiency of librarians organizing books. Somewhere in the distance, he could see other collections, ships bearing the marks of the Zeltharian Empire, the Cordon Expedition, dozens of fleets he recognized from intelligence reports, all perfectly preserved, all waiting patiently for their crews to accept their new reality. The humans hadn't conquered them. They had collected them. And as consciousness faded and preservation systems took hold, Vexhara wondered if perhaps this strange salvation was better than the alternative of slow extinction that awaited all spacefaring civilizations. In the vast darkness of the collection facility, 18 civilizations slept peacefully, dreaming dreams of continued existence in a universe where survival had been guaranteed not through strength of arms, but through the incomprehensible mercy of beings who had transcended the need for conquest. The warnings had been real. The offer of peaceful withdrawal had been genuine. And now, like all the others before them, the hegemony learned what lay beyond the boundaries of human space. Not death, but transformation into something larger than they had ever imagined possible. 14,000 ships joined the growing museum of galactic civilization, each one a testament to the heights that intelligence could reach and the inevitable destination that awaited all who reached too far into the darkness between stars. The collection was complete. The preservation had begun. And somewhere in the depths of space, new fleets were already preparing to make the same fatal mistake, driven by the same evolutionary programming that had doomed every civilization before them. But they would be warned. They would be given the same choice. And when they inevitably chose pride over wisdom, they too would find safety in the vast, impossible mercy of humanity's embrace. The pattern would repeat until every spacefaring species in the galaxy had been offered salvation. And perhaps then, when the collection was finally complete, the next phase of humanity's incomprehensible project could begin. Commander Zethal had been living in the preservation facility for 6 months when Dr. Martinez finally agreed to show him the truth. The request had taken weeks to process, requiring approval from entities whose names he couldn't pronounce and whose nature he was only beginning to suspect. But eventually clearance had been granted for him to visit what the humans call the archive. "Are you certain you want to see this?" Dr. Martinez asked as they walked through corridors that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. "Once you understand the full scope of what we're doing here, there's no going back to simpler explanations." Zethal nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The past months had been a revelation of sorts. Life in the facility was not the imprisonment he had expected, but rather an existence of unprecedented opportunity. He had access to the combined knowledge of hundreds of species, could speak with beings whose civilizations had solved problems his own people were still struggling with, and had begun research projects that would have been impossible in the narrow confines of Zeltharian space. But questions haunted him. Why were the humans doing this? What was the ultimate purpose of preserving so many civilizations? And, most disturbing of all, what had happened to humanity itself that had given them the power to treat entire galactic civilizations like specimens in a collection? "I need to understand," he said finally. "Whatever the cost." Dr. Martinez led him to a transport platform that moved through the facility using principles that violated several laws of physics. As they traveled, she spoke in the measured tones he had come to associate with humans discussing difficult topics. "Commander, what do you know about the concept of evolutionary pressure?" "Basic principles," Zethal replied. "Environmental challenges, force adaptation, or extinction. Species that cannot adapt to changing conditions die out." "Correct. Now, apply that concept to spacefaring civilizations. What environmental pressures do they face?" Zethal considered the question. "Resource depletion, territorial conflicts, Technological stagnation. Internal social collapse. All true, Dr. Martinez nodded. And what is the inevitable result when a species fails to overcome these pressures? Extinction. Yes. And in the 3 million years that we have been observing spacefaring civilizations in this galaxy, we have never seen a single species overcome all of these pressures indefinitely. Every civilization follows the same pattern: rapid expansion, technological peak, slow decline, extinction. The transport came to a stop at a platform that opened onto a chamber so vast that its far walls were lost in darkness. The ceiling curved overhead like the inside of a planet, and the floor was covered with what appeared to be pools of liquid starlight, each one containing swirling images that hurt to look at directly. "Welcome to the archive," Dr. Martinez said. "Here we preserve not just living beings, but the complete historical records of every civilization we have encountered." She led him to the nearest pool, and as they approached, the images within began to solidify into recognizable forms. Zethal found himself looking at the recorded history of species he had never seen before: bipedal beings with crystalline skin and eyes like diamonds. The Athonians, Dr. Martinez explained, a beautiful people who developed faster-than-light travel approximately 60,000 years ago. Their civilization lasted for nearly 40,000 years before internal conflicts over resource allocation led to civil war. The last of their kind died out 15,000 years ago. She moved to another pool, this one showing insectoid beings working with technologies that defied understanding. The Vexthol Collective, masters of quantum engineering who could build structures at the subatomic level. They lasted 55,000 years before their artificial intelligences achieved consciousness and decided their creators were inefficient. Complete extinction occurred 8,000 years ago. Pool after pool, each one containing the complete record of a dead civilization. Zethal began to see the pattern Dr. Martinez had described: rapid rise, golden age, slow decline, extinction. The details varied, but the outcome was always the same. "How many?" he asked quietly. "In this galaxy alone, we have documented the rise and fall of over 2 million spacefaring civilizations. In other galaxies that we monitor, the number is significantly higher." Other galaxies? Zethal felt reality shifting around him again. "How far does your surveillance extend?" "Our observation network covers approximately 40% of the observable universe," Dr. Martinez replied casually. "We are working to expand coverage, but the logistics of monitoring civilizations across such distances present certain challenges." Zethal staggered, overwhelmed by the scale of what she was describing. Humanity wasn't just collecting civilizations from their local region of space. They were conducting a preservation project that spanned a significant portion of the entire universe. "But why?" he managed to ask. "What is the purpose of all this?" Dr. Martinez led him deeper into the archive, past pools containing the histories of civilizations that had ruled for millions of years, that had built structures the size of solar systems, that had achieved wonders that made the greatest accomplishments of his own people seem like children's toys. "To answer that question," she said, "you need to understand what humanity really is." They reached a platform at the center of the archive, surrounded by a ring of pools that seemed somehow different from the others. The images within these pools were harder to interpret, showing scenes that Zethal's mind struggled to process. "This is the history of Earth," Dr. Martinez said. "Our true history, not the simplified version we show to most species." The first pool showed humanity as he had imagined them. Primitive bipeds struggling to develop basic technology, slowly learning to work metals and build simple machines. But as the images progressed, they began to change in ways that made his head ache. Approximately 50,000 years ago, Dr. Martinez narrated, humanity encountered something in the depths of space. We have never been entirely certain what it was. Some of our scholars believe it was the remnant of a previous universe. Others think it was a manifestation of the quantum consciousness that underlies reality itself. The images showed human figures standing before something that Zethal couldn't look at directly. Whatever it was seemed to exist in too many dimensions simultaneously, a presence that made the space around it bend and twist in impossible ways. The encounter changed us, Dr. Martinez continued. Not physically, but fundamentally. We began to understand things that no species should be able to understand. We saw patterns in the universe that are normally invisible. We perceived the connections between consciousness, reality, and time itself. "You're not human anymore," Zethal whispered, the truth finally dawning on him. "We are what humanity became when it transcended the limitations that trap every other species in the cycle of extinction," she replied. "We are what you could become, given enough time and proper guidance." The next pool showed Earth's transformation. Human cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, technologies that worked by convincing reality to behave differently, ships that traveled not through space but through the gaps between thoughts. It was beautiful and terrible and completely alien to everything Zethal had believed possible. "The entity we encountered offered us a choice," Dr. Martinez explained. "We could continue along the path that every other civilization follows, achieving great things, but ultimately destroying ourselves through the very traits that made our success possible. Or we could accept transformation into something larger, something that could exist beyond the normal constraints of physical reality. And you chose transformation. We chose survival. And with survival came responsibility." She led him to the final pool, and the images within showed the scope of humanity's true project. Vast structures that existed between galaxies, networks of consciousness that spanned cosmic distances, preservation facilities in thousands of locations throughout the universe. "We have been tasked with ensuring that when the current universe ends, something will survive to seed the next one," Dr. Martinez said. "Every civilization we preserve, every species we collect, every fragment of knowledge and culture we archive becomes part of the foundation for what comes next." Zethal felt his legs give out, and he sat heavily on the edge of the platform. The magnitude of what he was being told was beyond his ability to fully process. Humanity hadn't just transcended the normal limitations of existence. They had become gardeners of reality itself, collecting the seeds of consciousness to plant in the soil of whatever came after the heat death of the universe. "The warnings," he said weakly. "You really were trying to protect us. From yourselves, yes. Every species faces the same critical moment. The point where their expansion brings them into contact with forces beyond their understanding. Most react with aggression, like your people did. Some few choose wisdom and accept our offer of voluntary preservation before their civilizations reach the critical failure point. How many choose wisdom? Perhaps 1 in 1,000, Dr. Martinez admitted. The evolutionary programming that drives species to become spacefaring in the first place makes peaceful acceptance of limitation extremely difficult. But those that do choose cooperation often become some of our most valuable contributors." She gestured to the archive around them. "Much of what you see here was organized and cataloged by preserved civilizations working voluntarily with us. They have found purpose in ensuring that their knowledge and culture survive the end of everything." Zethal looked up at her, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not human in any sense he understood, but something that had once been human before transcending into a form of existence that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. "What happens to us now?" he asked. "To the Zeltharian people, to the hegemony, to all the species you've preserved?" "That depends on what you choose to become," Dr. Martinez replied. "Some prefer to live out their existence in perfect simulations of their homeworlds, maintaining the illusion of their original lives. Others join our research projects, contributing their unique perspectives to our understanding of consciousness and reality. A very few eventually undergo the same transformation that we did, becoming part of the larger project. And if we choose to resist, to fight against this preservation..." Dr. Martinez's expression grew sad. Then, You'll be kept comfortable and safe until you're ready to make a different choice. We have all the time in the universe, Commander. Eventually, every preserved species comes to understand that cooperation offers more fulfillment than resistance. As they began the journey back to the residential areas, Thal found his mind reeling with the implications of what he had learned. His people, his civilization, his entire species was now part of a collection that spanned the universe, preserved by beings whose nature was so far beyond normal understanding that they might as well be gods. But perhaps that was not the tragedy he had initially believed it to be. Perhaps it was the greatest gift imaginable. The guarantee that everything they were, everything they had accomplished, everything they might yet become would survive even the death of the cosmos itself. Dr. Martinez, he said as they reached the transport platform, I want to contribute to the research, to the preservation effort, to whatever comes next. How do I begin? She smiled, and for a moment he caught a glimpse of what she might have been like before humanity's transformation. By choosing to see beyond the limitations of your original existence, Commander. By accepting that survival sometimes requires becoming something larger than what you were. As the transport carried them back through the vast facility, passing habitat modules where millions of beings from hundreds of species lived out their preserved lives, Zethal realized that he was no longer a prisoner. He was a refugee, granted sanctuary by beings whose compassion was matched only by their incomprehensible power. The warnings had been real. The choice to respect human territory had been offered genuinely. And now, having failed to make the wise choice, his people had been given something even more valuable, the chance to become part of something eternal. In the depths of space, more fleets were undoubtedly preparing to test the boundaries of human space, driven by the same evolutionary programming that had doomed every civilization before them. They would be warned. They would be offered the choice of peaceful withdrawal. And when they inevitably chose aggression over wisdom, they too would find themselves preserved in the vast, impossible mercy of humanity's embrace. The collection would continue until every conscious species in the universe had been offered the gift of survival beyond the normal constraints of existence. It was not conquest. It was conservation on a cosmic scale, conducted by beings whose love for consciousness itself transcended the petty territorial disputes that drove lesser species to extinction. The warnings had always been real. The offer of mercy had always been genuine. And, in the end, those who were too proud to listen discovered that sometimes salvation came whether you wanted it or not. The universe was vast and filled with wonders beyond imagination. And, thanks to humanity's incomprehensible project, all of those wonders would survive to see whatever came next when the stars finally died and reality itself was reborn.